The best piece of advice that I got: before you walk in with a plan, take as much time as they will give you in listening.
I'm sure like that listening and observation really helps in understanding of people and cultures. Has there been a bad piece of advice that you have ever received?
Ooh, I'm sure.
Annie Tsai is a successful early-stage investor, advisor, author, and a columnist. Her community engagement work focuses on education, housing, arts, and supporting working parents. She has built, grown, and led public software companies on 4 continents over the past 20-plus years.
This is one of the best communities I've been, where there is a lot of genuine discussion. What inspired you?
A lot of these entrepreneurs and small businesses are working 24/7. They're working on the weekends. They're working during our holidays. I think that's a real challenge with scale when you're focusing on creators, entrepreneurs. The other thing that I think has been quite challenging is...
Hello, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde podcast, where we dive into the art and science of strategy, execution, and leadership. I'm your host, Priyanka Shinde, author of The Art of Strategic Execution and a consultant for tech leaders. In this podcast, I bring you candid conversations with top executives, startup founders, and industry experts who are driving innovation, delivering results, and staying ahead in today's competitive landscape. We will break down what it takes to tap into founder mode and turn vision into action. If you are serious about elevating your leadership and execution skills, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. It helps the podcast and ensures you never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to the Priyanka Shinde podcast. Today I have a very special guest who is doing a lot of different things. She's truly a superwoman. Annie Tsai has had a lot of job titles over the years. She's been founding, growing, and scaling tech companies across 4 continents for over 2 decades. Today, she is the Chief Operating Officer and Finance Officer at Interact, an author, investor, and writes a weekly column on technology and culture at one of the last newspapers in circulation in the Bay Area. I'm truly honored to have Annie here on the show with me. Welcome to the show, Annie.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's so great to, meet you for the first time here virtually and talk to you. I know you have been doing a lot of different things. And it's not that we are probably not very far from each other physically either, because we're located in the Bay Area, very close to San Mateo.
Yeah, it's definitely life has gotten hectic, especially with my youngest sort of starting school next year. So it's getting crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's why I say, especially being in this place in the tech industry, it is a lot of things happening. And then, of course, as a mom, there's things you're taking care of as well, and some of it we'll chat about. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about you and what you do currently.
Yeah, I have, like you said, I have a number of job titles. I would sort of describe my work as I'm kind of just the problem solver in all of these different contexts. I'm there to, figure out how to scale the business. I'm there to figure out how to operationalize all of these ideas that come up, motivate the team to really show up and do their best work every day. And so those are all things that I think resonate throughout the rest of everything that I do. My personal passions have led me down a path of writing for many years. I studied communications and literature at Cal in the 90s and didn't want to get into traditional print journalism. So it's a little ironic that today I write a column for a traditional print newspaper that is also online. But it's been a great experience sort of re-injecting writing back into my life on a regular cadence. And I think it's been important in reconnecting the creativity neurons that I think a lot of us frankly lose over the years. And I've been very appreciative of that.
That's wonderful. Yes, I think definitely, having some way to release your creative
Mhm.
side, be it through writing, some people do
Yeah.
it through art. It's
Mhm.
really wonderful. I think it gives you a different perspective, and or maybe you look at the same things with a different eye.
Oh yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that our kids and the young people in our lives, they look to us to see, what kind of behavior we're modeling. And it's hard. It's hard to be a role model all of the time, but I think that one of the things that is important for them to see in their parents is that they're also pursuing things that are personally interesting to them, even though, a lot of people, I think, may be doing work for the sake of funding a lifestyle or saving for college or whatever, which is totally fine. But showing that you have something in your life that you are passionate about is important.
I couldn't agree more. One of the reasons I'm here talking to you
Mhm.
is that, and you've worked in, like I said, you've been across continents. So tell us a little bit more about how through your journey, and
Mhm.
what has been really pivotal through these years
Uh,
for you.
I think it's the same thing that is still in play today, which is that I don't frequently say no to an opportunity to do something that that is new or that is additive or that I've never done before. I think taking each opportunity or each idea that comes up as a reason to try something new and learn, that I think has been in particular a reason as to why I've been able to do so many of the really interesting projects that I have over the years. And so, sometimes I'll get a call from an old mentor, which has happened a couple times, and they'll ask me if I'm interested in working on a specific project. It might be paid for, it might be not, but the networking opportunity is amazing. And if I can make it work, of course I'm going to try, because what you get out of that is a learning or insights or experience that you can easily apply to something else. And so I think having the capacity and the capability of trying to say yes more than no has been a little bit of the secret sauce, and that has given me exposure to scaling businesses in the Netherlands or rolling out programs in Australia or and Western Europe, and that's all of those experiences accrued over a career really gives me, I think, this wonderful depth and breadth of stories that that's just really, I don't know, I appreciate it, but it's also been really helpful, as I approach new challenges, because I can, draw back into that toolbox.
Yeah. Is there a particular moment or lesson that you frequently reach back out?
Oh gosh. Well, for a long time, because I haven't always focused on an international audience, but sort of like different companies with our target audiences. Sometimes it's been small business customers in the United States, other times it's been global multinational enterprises and things like that. And so as it relates to your target customer, I think the relevancy in like creating, or the importance of having a relevant cultural um, understanding of how that person is approaching the conversation is so important. And I think a lot of people recognize that, but they may not have the ability to apply that very easily without first, taking some time to read up or understand or ask around, right?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. Like the first time I had to do work in Germany, my I didn't have an understanding of the cultural context of, sort of in the early 2000s, how formal, especially on the Swiss German side, how formal some of these business meetings were going to be. And quite frankly, the role that women play in those meetings. And so, the way that I approached it from a young American girl was going to be very different. And so I had to take the time to learn about what would be a more welcome way to collaborate, and so the cultural context is tremendously important. Same thing with working with Japanese clients, same thing with working with Spanish clients versus French clients. That cultural context and how to approach the conversation and the engagement is probably something that I reach back out to all the time.
Yeah. I think that is really interesting, because you're talking about cultural context in the sense of countries, And I'm sure you mentioned that, small companies or big multinationals, organizations have their own culture too. And I'm
It's
sure
true.
like
Mhm.
that additionally plays into it. And so adapting to each one of them, I'm sure must not have been easy necessarily. And so is there any kind of advice that you received during your years that you would like to share?
Oh, yeah. I think the best piece of advice that I got as I was approaching, client engagement and client conversations was really, before you walk in with a plan, of course, have a plan for what you want to achieve, but take as much time as they will give you in listening. Listen to how they address each other. Listen to how colloquial the conversation is, or how friendly it is, how formal things have to be, and be as adaptive as you can in real time to the situation at hand. Because even within a cultural context, people are not going to be, cookie cutter, right? And so, not assuming that anything is really going to be what it is is probably the best advice that I got. And taking the time to listen first is the second, I'd say.
I think that is really well put, because listening is usually the one thing that not a lot of us do well, and not
Yeah.
something that is like topmost in the list of things that you should know how to do. So I'm sure like that listening and observation really helps in understanding of people and cultures.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think people think about a lot, and it comes up in conversations a lot, but in practice, I think is quite hard, is learning. This is like a very much an art to asking the right questions, and I think it's hand in hand with listening, right? Because you're listening to absorb some context or some information to help you figure out how to, like, what the next step is, but at the same time, you have everybody goes into a conversation with some sort of intent, right? And so you probably have a set of questions that you're looking to ask, especially from a discovery standpoint for product. But the two paths of listening and asking the right questions, it's kind of hard for those to collide in just the right spot. And so I think there's quite a bit of art to that too.
Yeah, it does take a lot of practice. On the other hand, has there been a bad piece of advice that you have ever received?
Ooh, I'm sure. I don't, I think there's a lot of stuff that I was advised to try and do that maybe worked out less well for me than it did for them. And I don't know if I would necessarily call that bad advice, maybe contextually less appropriate, maybe the timing was different, maybe generationally things were different. I mean, we grew up during a time where our managers are mostly retiring now, and so these are the folks that are today are considered considered to be generationally disconnected from the largest percentage of our workforce. And so a lot of advice that I got when I was an early IC and a young manager are frankly less relevant than they were back then.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that is, we hear about the generational gaps. You're talking about
Mhm.
like the generation above us. And
Mhm.
then there is also like this new generation coming in, which is also like, if you are a manager or a leader now, you are
Mhm.
working with people on your teams who are the next generation. And sometimes there can be a gap there too. I mean, it's bound to happen. How do you approach it in that other direction, where you are now a leader and you're leading these teams, and you are probably seeing people on your team across different generations? How do you bridge that gap between them?
I don't know if I have like a playbook for that, but I think my general approach is take everyone for who they are, where they come from. Each person's going to have a different set of skills, both interpersonal and technical, right? Hard and soft skills, and they're there because they have something to contribute and add. And so my job as a leader is to figure out, with all of these incredible skills for any given problem, how can I best capitalize on this set of skills in order to achieve the best outcomes. And so from a leadership standpoint, really taking the time to understand and recognize what those skills are that you have to work with. That's probably the biggest job that I have.
Yeah. What excites you most about your current role, like being at Interact and
Ooh,
leading operations and
yeah,
finance?
I think it's the team. The team is very curiosity driven. They don't believe necessarily in silos. A lot of organizations, people, they are either expected to stay in their lane, in their swim lane, or they are not given the opportunity to, right? But at Interact, one of our core tenets is that great ideas can come from anywhere. But as that plays out, is that anybody can work on a great idea also. And so, I may be working on go to market and operations and finance and closing books and stuff, all of that, which I enjoy, but I'm also coding, a couple hours a day and solving business problems and trying to figure other things out. And so it's, I think the variety of things that all of us have the opportunity to work on a day-to-day basis is what keeps me very excited about coming to work.
Yeah. I mean, your team, I'm sure, like, uh, when you have a great team, it just makes it so much easier to show up every
Mhm.
day and do something and go in together and try to solve these problems. And I'm sure like a lot of what you said helps you build the company and scale and grow the company the way you want to. And at the same time, I'm sure there are challenges. So how, I mean,
Mhm.
you've been scaling organizations, and I'm sure at the same time there are new challenges that you're seeing currently. So tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about that. How do you, what challenges are you seeing in scaling a platform like Interact?
Yeah, I think as depending on your target audience, the more down market you go. So let's say we're focused on the United States, small and medium sized businesses primarily, right? But also a lot of creators and entrepreneurs and young small businesses will use our offering. And so the more down market you go in B2B, the more consumer marketing oriented and the more consumer buying behavior you see. And so how we think about value realization, how we think about, talking about marketing value and ROI is going to be very different than if we're doing an enterprise B2B product marketing playbook. And so, we scaling out at that level where your customer is treating this purchase more like a B2C engagement, the price sensitivity, value sensitivity, ensuring that when the touch points are happening is right for them, as opposed to based on a standard 9 to 5 schedule. A lot of these entrepreneurs and small businesses are working 24/7. They're working on the weekends. They're working during our holidays, right? I think that's a real challenge with scale, when you're focusing on creators, entrepreneurs, and the lower end of the market in general. I think everybody experiences this. The other thing that I think has been quite challenging is which is solved with a very like the top of funnel expanding dramatically. And so we've done that and it's great, but in the early days of Interact, I think, verticalizing your go to market is important and great initially. But with entrepreneurs and young small businesses, if they don't see themselves as like a vertical audience, then they're going to think that it's not for them. And so it became really important for us to have a really, I think, much more comprehensive vertical conversation with our customers and with our audience, as opposed to keeping it generic up here or staying in a couple of niches. And so with a small team, that can be quite a challenge.
I think that what you just said really resonated, especially as somebody who runs a small business or is a
Mm,
like single person entrepreneur. I've looked at Interact, and I can tell you like I've looked at other providers as well, and there's something about it that spoke to me in terms of like, okay, this thing, I think this will work for me, even though I'm sure like there are so many others, and that could be for many different reasons. Some of it, what you're saying is how do we also connect with that lower end market, while at the same time we might be working with enterprises. Before we
Right.
move further, I just wanted to share, or I would like you to share quickly what Interact does, since we didn't touch upon that.
Yeah, so we make quiz marketing software. Customers use us for all sorts of things. We have thousands of customers worldwide, and the primary use case is lead generation. The conversion rates are up to 14 times greater than any white paper or standard lead magnet, and so we integrate with just about any sort of marketing automation system or course system that you might be using to nurture and convert. But personality type quizzes to drive lead generation help people understand a little bit more about not only who they are, but that firmographic information on why would they even be landing on that website in the first place, and helping them essentially self-select into where they are in the buying journey. Then our customers have the ability to really narrowly focus on what the conversation in that point of the buying journey is. And so converting people down the funnel is much more effective than any other lead magnet. So that's the first use case. Second use case, a lot of enterprises and nonprofits use us for is really around education and awareness and community engagement. And so they might use lead generation at the top of the funnel, and then post sale in more of a customer lifecycle sense, they might be using us, throughout all of their online content, as well as in their blog posts and emails and things like that. A lot of podcasts will put quizzes in their show notes as sort of a way to both drive lead generation, but also point people to other relevant resources. And so those are all use cases. We have a ton of e-commerce customers that use us for product recommendations. So sort of the sky's the limit on on what you think you can do. But we've had a lot of fun tracking our customers over the years and seeing what they do with it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There's something about quizzes or tests, right? Getting a score, even though I think as a kid, we might all have not been very excited about tests. I think this is something that like you're saying, there's a lot higher chance of conversion when people see there's a quiz there, and I want to see, what does it say?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of psychology to quiz taking, and I used to joke with my friends about it that, once you reach a certain point in your life, a certain age in your life, you're not really getting a lot from other people. Like you're more giving, right? And so you have kids, let's say you're giving to your kids. Your kids aren't asking you how your day is. They're not asking you what keeps you up at night. They're not asking you what's most important to you, your priorities over the next 30 days. No one's asking you that, right? They're just expecting you to do stuff. And same thing with your managers, right? The only time a lot of people really only get feedback is once a year, once a quarter. If you're lucky, you're in a continuous review cycle, but that's going to be transactional. And so the psychology of quiz taking is really that you're getting an opportunity for someone or something to actually tell you something more about you. And I don't consider it to be centric or narcissistic. I think it's meeting a human need that I think everybody has.
Very well said. Yeah, there is definitely something that helps you. I think there is a kind of validation that also takes place. So in a way, you know yourself, and sometimes depending on what you're looking for or to get out of the quiz, it validates you. And I think ties back to the psychology piece you say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure at Interact, given over the last 2 or 3 years, with everything that's going on in the tech industry, of course, there's Gen AI stuff, which I'm sure plays very well into the work that you do. And at the same time, how do you balance? There is a strategy, and then there's all these things coming in, but you also have your day-to-day operational stuff that you and your team need to execute on. So how do you balance that in such a high velocity environment?
I don't think there's a company executive that is still in business that is going to say that they have not had to pivot or shift a strategy or add to their strategy with the sort of onslaught of Gen AI, right? AI has been around for a long time, and we've used sort of machine learning and early AI in our product and in how we operationalize the business for several years. However, Gen AI, I think, presented as a particular opportunity to solve some longstanding challenges that we've been working through. And I think, as software executives really look to their strategies over these next, I'd say, 3 to 5 years, if they're not thinking about how they can use AI to lower churn, to increase the velocity through their sales funnel, to reduce their OpEx on marketing spend, to significantly improve productivity for R&D and how quickly they can release product. I mean, there are all sorts of applications that have come up. And I'll tell you, like, even on a personal level, like the last year and a half of me diving in to Gen AI, both through, using the GPTs, the UX driven GPTs, but also through coding in Python, like the amount of additional time that you're freeing up to do other things, to actually think, to do the things that humans were designed to do, has been tremendously beneficial to me. I feel like I'm working on the things I should be working on now, as opposed to, trying to knock down a to-do list of 25 items every day. And I think that as we all, and as business leaders all sort of approach and embrace Gen AI into how they work, every single line item on their strategy, whatever it is going to have a Gen AI driven solution or incorporated. Is that what you're hearing also?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, definitely, I think it has upended tech in many different ways, some very good, some not so good. But there is no ignoring what's coming with AI and GPTs and everything that's going on. And I think it is definitely increasing, I feel like, the velocity of change, especially in tech.
It has increased. What I think people... So we can separate this conversation into like two buckets, right? We can separate it into the company and whether or not they'll continue to be leaders in their space if they choose not to adopt Gen AI in as many ways as is reasonably possible, right? And then there's the employee. And I think that something you mentioned earlier is really important, which is Gen AI is disrupting the workforce in really significant and serious ways. And we need to talk about it, right? I have sat on a few panels in the county of San Mateo around AI and, workforce, potential workforce redevelopment, but also the impact to workers. And, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear in workers. And this is really kind of the first time in 50 years or so where technology has disrupted employment viability in tech. I mean, the first time was with, computing, right? Really. And now Gen AI is saying, well, maybe you don't even need entry-level developers anymore. And so it is a real concern that I think people need to talk about. I know that the large organizations have started the path of saying we're going to define what the roles of the future are going to be, and then we're going to figure out how we're going to create policies to address getting our employees to those next places. But I agree with you. I think the speed of change is so fast that whatever they say today may not be relevant even a year from now.
So true. I think there will be a lot of ambiguity in the short term with respect to especially what does our job look like, what kind of jobs will stay. And at the same time, there will be something new that comes up. So you have to kind of maintain that long-term vision or look a little bit further out than what the current situation might be saying to you.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of build those skills, right? So that is something that this kind of brings me to kind of the next part I wanted to touch upon. And I wanted to start with, so you talked about coding in Python today, and I love that, that you're still doing it. You're the CEO and the finance officer, but you're coding. And so it's really important for many people to hear this. I feel like, especially sometimes women don't get the due on being technical, and titles don't necessarily mean anything in terms of how technical or not you are. So I love that. And it brings me to the Moms in Tech community, which
Mm-hmm.
you are a very, very important part of. So tell us a
Okay.
little bit more about that community, what you can share, and yeah, what inspired you to take that lead role in uh, really building that community up.
So I joined Moms in Tech when it was very small in 2017, 2018, something like that. And it was during a time where I was going through, I had founded a consumer ed tech company with a good friend of mine. And, it was the first time in a long time where I had decided to work on my own startup. Uh, and it was the second that I've really focused on. But this one, it was a different time in my life. I had a 4-year-old at the time, had already been a C-level executive and had exits and things like that. And so, there's a little bit of a context shift going from leading and scaling and growing an organization to going from 0 to 1, right? A little bit of a context shift. And so I needed additional support. And my friend invited me to this very early group. And as coincidentally, when you're that early stage, there are going to be lulls in things because you don't have a list of 25 things to do. You have a list of 3 things to do, right? Find your advisors, find money, and build your product. and and so yeah, just those 3 small things. And so I volunteered to help out here and there, and it sort of took off from there. And it's been about 7 years now. And these days I run community engagement and education. So I take topics that are coming up in conversation in our community, and I go out and find speakers to help with facilitating, some sort of engagement or exercise or education. Earlier today, I posted on LinkedIn about asking someone to volunteer an hour on safe online gaming for kids, which is a huge topic that comes up and keeps me up at night. And the CMO of Bark volunteered. So, it's just been wonderful to stay engaged with the community. I'm doing a prompt engineering workshop tomorrow, which will be fun. And we've sort of really been on a mission to empower the moms in tech community, as many people who will raise their hand, to upskill in prompt engineering, because that alone, I think, is going to be the single most important skill that anyone builds over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And ever since I joined the community, which was much later, I'm like, how did I never know about this?
Yeah.
Even though from what I believe, I think it was founded by somebody at Facebook very, very
Mm-hmm.
early on, right? And I'm like, this is one of the best communities I've been, where there is a lot of genuine discussion. There is so much willingness to really help each other out. And it has grown so much. And it isn't like, okay, people are in there just for an agenda or something like that. And that's what I love about it, that it's a community in its true form. And I'm part of different groups on Facebook, but none of them are that community in its true sense. So really hats
Right.
off to you and the other folks who are really putting in a lot of volunteer time. I have to say this, like you all, there are moderators for every
Mhm.
subgroup, and it's a lot of work, I'm sure, in addition to everything else that
Yeah,
is on a mom's plate, right? I mean,
that's right.
um, so thank you so much for doing that. And it's I think it's really great to have that, for especially for women in tech who are moms, or who may go down that journey in the future, because I feel like there is still so much. I don't know if bias is the right word, but there is still a lot of headwinds that women in tech are facing. And if you hear about a bunch of recent news, right, there is things around DEI that are coming out now. It's not a
Mhm.
good thing at all. Women are leaving the workforce, especially in tech. More women leaders are leaving as well. So when you hear all that, when you see that, what are your thoughts on this current trend that's happening?
I may take a little bit of a contrarian view of it. I think that it is very hard to turn a ship that is already set sail many years ago. It's very hard to turn that around. You might be able to change the direction by a few degrees, right? You might be able to change some people within, like, who are on that ship, but it is hard to turn the whole ship around. Not impossible, but hard. Where I think there's a really great and interesting opportunity for women or anybody who feels like, the current ship that they're on was not made for them, which is a lot of people. Where I think that opportunity sits is in creating the world that you want to see, right? And I think that women, and I think underrepresented people in tech make incredible entrepreneurs and make incredible CEOs and can work on some real problems and not just enterprise productivity workflow, which I'm frankly sick of seeing. and and I think that we have the opportunity to create that world. And how wonderful will it be when that world is here, right? It doesn't have to be us trying to figure out how to plug into this space that we constantly feel unwelcome in, or we constantly feel like we're getting gaslit in. And like that, it doesn't have to be that way. So I say that from a standpoint where, I'm finally at a point in my career where I get to choose who I work with and what I work on. I know a lot of people don't have that choice, and so take it for what it is, right? But that's my perspective.
It's a very empowering way. When you said it to me, what I was picturing is, or what the phrase came to mind was seat at the table. And you're like, I don't need the seat at the table. I'm just going to get my own table and have my seats and I decide how to fill it.
Yeah, that's right.
There is, I mean, sometimes these shifts can you have to sort of distinguish the noise from the facts and all of that. And then it is, part of it is also what can I do versus what is out of my control. And what you're saying is very empowering. It's like, there is things we can do and we can do it in a certain way. And so, let's push towards that. And I think that's a more empowering take on this whole DEI thing, or like you hear all these like phrases around masculine energy and stuff. And at the same time, I'm sure like there are people who do feel down because they hear these things.
Yeah, I mean, what's happened is awful. And don't get me wrong. And I think that, people are going to, I think rightfully so, make decisions about how they spend their money based on what they see happening in the news. And that is fine. And their absolute right to do, right? The other thing that I think they need to do, if you're angry about something, is, protesting and talking about it online is only going to get you so far, right? But what are the things that you can do? And we're not talking about changing what we experience over the next couple of years. Like the things that are going to be impactful is the world that we create, that our kids are going to be living in. That's really the horizon that I think we need to elevate into, because very little lasting change happens in 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 years. It's got to be the steady drumbeat of sustainable movement towards whatever that H3 is. And it's not going to be while we're working. We're going to have to suffer through it. I think everybody needs to be okay with that. But our kids and our grandkids, like that world we can create.
Yeah. Like how do we give them a world that's better or more aligned to what will help them live through their lifetime and then their kids and so on.
Right. And something I think about a lot is sort of the friction, the constant friction that I think Americans deal with, which is, the idealism that we have around being an individual and having the ability to control your destiny, which is so core to the American identity. So there's that tenet. And then there's sort of this sense of community. And like, at what point do we have to put aside the individual in service to the community, right? And at what point do those easily come together? At what point is there a lot of friction? And I think the leaders that really come up over these next 10 years to drive that change for our kids and for our grandkids. Like those people are going to, I think, have a really strong point of view that resonates with a lot of people on this question of like, where's the right intersection that we need to focus on for the individual versus community.
That's really well said. I kind of feel like there's also that writer that can articulate that so well. And so tell us a little bit more about your writing journey and how you're exploring these topics at the intersection of technology and culture and all of that.
Yeah. This sort of all started back in 2012. We had sold our startup to Intuit, and Wiley approached me to write a book focused on, like a business book focused on small businesses, which I did. And the experience overall was wonderful. It's so funny because I was very pregnant while I was writing this, and I turned in the manuscript. I was like 35,000 words or something like that. Turned in the manuscript, and then the next day went to the hospital. And yeah, it's crazy. And I really enjoyed the process of long form creation. But my personality is, it's called pressure prompted. So I kind of don't do a lot. It doesn't look like I'm doing a lot right up until the point in time where the product needs to be created. There's a lot happening up here, but there's very little happening on paper. And so that moving to long form and moving to weekly, I think has been really good for me, forcing myself into the habit of more regularly drawing things out of my head and putting it down on paper. So, even in my 40s, I'm still learning about how to do my job better. I think we all need to do that. The research piece of it is interesting. So my weekly columns are somewhere around 800 words a week. It's not crazy, but it's actually really hard to hit 700 to 800 words because it's very easy. I find that it's very easy to write 300 or 400 words on a topic. And it's very easy to write several thousand words on a topic, but it's really hard to get to 800 because you have to be succinct in a way that is still insightful. So you can extract, right? But you can't extract too much because you'll run out of space. So that's been an interesting challenge. And I very much enjoy that. This most recently, last month, I published another book that's really drawn from my desire to empower parents to feel like they do. Yes, you do know what you're doing. Don't worry, you'll be fine. And your kids will be fine. But the role that you're going to play is going to be different than the role that your parents played with you. And so the book that I published last month is on investing. So teach your kids investing. Some financial literacy is something that I'm very passionate about and have, for several years, a friend of mine have been trying to sort of get it more into schools, but has been tough because adding curriculum to public schools is very hard. So, I just decided to write a book, and it's the beginning of a series, the Teach Your Kids Anything series. The next one is on prompt engineering, which is currently in progress. And I had a draft on internet safety, but as it turns out, someone said that instead of teach your kids internet safety, it should be teach your grandparents internet safety.
Oh, yes, I can definitely attest to that.
Yes.
Wow.
So it's been fun. It's been fun.
Congratulations on the most recent book launch.
Thank you.
I think it's a fabulous subject. I think that is something that doesn't come up, right? You learn all of these other things in school or even when you go to university, and financial literacy isn't something that is, taught as such. And so I love the topic, and I love the series you're doing. I don't know if you have the book to show, if you have it handy to show it to everyone, but it's teach your kids to, or what, investing in,
teach your kids investing in 10 easy lessons. So it's an easy read. It's full of activities, and the tone is focused on giving busy parents, the ability to read 10 pages and have something that they can do with their kids right then and there. Something with materials that are in the house, that so you don't have to go out and buy more stuff. Just making it accessible and easy, and make it make sense for kids, from ages six and up.
Wonderful. Well, I'll also put a link in the show
Oh,
notes so
sure.
that
Thank you.
everybody can benefit. I think it's a very important topic. So all this conversation has been wonderful, and I have this burning question. How do you do all this? There is so much going on. You're writing a book, you have a weekly column, you obviously are running a company as a CEO, CFO, you are running a community. I mean, there is more and more. I could go on. Tell us, what's your superpower?
A lot of people get stuck on the sleep thing. But I don't think that's actually it. I tend to not sleep a ton, but it's always been that way since childhood. So, something like 5, 6, maybe 7, but usually around 5 or 6 hours a night. The biggest thing is that I stopped watching TV a long time ago. And if you look at other people's, entertainment consumption habits, scrolling on social media and watching TV, hitting Netflix, that probably gives me 2 to 4 hours a night where I'm working on things that I really enjoy doing, and I work during those times. My favorite time to work is after my kids go to sleep, when it's quiet in the house. And that's when most people are watching TV or doom scrolling, and I'm just not doing that. The other thing that I think has been really helpful was the thorough adoption of automation and AI in my personal life. And so freeing up 90 seconds here, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, all of those little time savings hacks that get created through custom GPTs and Zapier and all sorts of things, that creates time too. And so it's not just for work, it's for your life as well.
Yeah, I love that. I think like every minute you might be saving here and there, it all adds up, and you never know, it might be 60 minutes, 120 minutes that you free up during
Right.
the day.
And the other thing is that, not a lot of people talk about this, but let's say your task list is 20 items and you automate away 10 of those things, right? You're not only taking away the time that it took for you to do those things, you're also freeing your mind from the context shift recovery that is very real. And especially for moms, parents with young children, that context shifting is probably the most exhausting thing that you have during the day. Because if you think about it, parents who are working full-time as a professional coding, maybe you're doing marketing, maybe you're doing product or whatever, right? You're doing that, and then you're coming home and you're talking to a 3-year-old that's asking you questions every 32 seconds while you're responding to texts and Slack messages and email and all of these things. And the context shifting is nonstop. And the more you can free your mind from that, it's really incredible how much additional space you're creating, even if it's just a little bit of time.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that will be really helpful. And I love that you're using this whole tech advancement that has like really, revolutionized not just, what apps might get built or what companies might come out of it, but also just our day-to-day life as a parent who's working full-time, who's balancing a lot of different things, including in a way when you're working on things that you love, it's self-care as well. So thank you for sharing that. And I love that, this is how technology can actually help us get our life back. Yeah. Well, it has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed every minute of it. And yeah, we have to stop doom scrolling.
No, it's okay. I do it sometimes too.
Yeah. Oh, well. Well, you have a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you once again. And yeah, I'm really
Thanks
glad
for
we did
having
this.
me.
Bye.
Bye.
If today's conversation sparked new ideas or challenged your perspective, I'd love to hear from you. I work with tech leaders and founders to tackle complex challenges, whether it's scaling teams, making high-stakes decisions, or turning ambitious ideas into reality. If that sounds like something you are navigating, let's connect. Reach out via my website, thepriyankashinde.com, or find me on LinkedIn.